Okay, so this one's a little different than what I usually do here, and I'm genuinely excited about it. If you've been here a while, you know my whole thing is the science side, the neuroscience, the nervous system stuff, the here's what's actually happening in your toddler's brain content. And that's not going anywhere, I promise. But somewhere along the way, while I was deep in research mode, which if you've watched more than one of my videos, you know is basically my permanent state, I kept stumbling into something I wasn't looking for. Old stuff, really old in some cases, practices for caring for babies and toddlers that go back generations, sometimes centuries, in cultures all over the world. Things parents have been doing for their kids long, long before anyone had a word like neuroscience, let alone a YouTube channel about it. And here's what got me, honestly. A lot of it holds up, not all of it. I want to be clear about that right away, because there's also plenty of old folk wisdom that's outdated, or frankly, not great by modern safety standards, and we're not doing that here. But a surprising amount of it lines up with things we now have actual research behind, which raises a question I can't stop thinking about. How did they know? Without labs, without studies, without any of the tools we have now, how did so many different cultures completely independently land on practices that decades or centuries later science would basically confirm? So, new little series starting today. We're going to look at cultural traditions, remedies, and rituals around child wellness from all over the world, chamomile teas, specific massage techniques, bedtime habits, hygiene practices, all sorts of things, and dig into what's actually going on underneath them. I want to be really upfront about something though, because it matters to me. This is not about replacing your pediatrician. Nothing here is medical advice, and if your kid is sick, please, actual doctor's advice every time. What this is about is curiosity, appreciation, honestly. The idea that across completely different cultures, with completely different languages and completely different starting points, parents have been figuring out pieces of what helps a kid feel calm, feel cared for, feel safe for an extremely long time. And a lot of that figured out knowledge just got passed down, parent to parent, without ever needing a research paper to back it up, until now in some cases. Let me give you a small preview of the kind of thing I mean, because I think this one's a really good example of they were onto something. Honey in warm tea or warm water for soothing a cough, this shows up across an enormous number of cultures. Eastern Europe, parts of the Middle East, various traditions across Asia, certain folk remedies in the Americas, wildly different cultures, all landing on some version of warm liquid plus honey for a kid with a cough and a sore throat. And here's the thing, there's actual clinical research on this. A study published in 2007 in the Archives of Pediatrics and Adolescent Medicine, led by pediatric researcher Ian Paul at Penn State College of Medicine, looked at honey's effect on nighttime cough in children and found it performed comparably to, in some measures better than, a common over-the-counter cough suppressant for reducing cough frequency and improving sleep for both kids and parents. An old simple, my grandmother did this remedy, and decades later there's a study saying, yeah, actually that does something. I have to add the important safety note here because it's genuinely important. Honey should never be given to babies under 1 year old because of the risk of infant botulism. Their digestive systems can't handle it the way an older child's can. This is one of those places where old remedy needs a modern safety update layered on top of it. Tradition plus updated safety information together, that's kind of the whole spirit of what this series is going to be. Another one, and this is more about a practice than an ingredient, is the idea of a consistent, almost ritualized physical touch as part of caring for a baby or toddler. Infant massage, in various forms, shows up across a huge range of cultures, parts of India with traditions around daily oil massage for babies that are, in some communities, an absolute non-negotiable part of early childcare, certain practices in parts of Africa, swaddling and wrapping traditions that show up in different forms on basically every continent. And again, there's a research thread here separate from the cultural one. Touch in infants and toddlers is connected to things like regulation of stress hormones. Researcher Tiffany Field, who founded the Touch Research Institute at the University of Miami's medical school back in the early 1990s, has published a large body of work on infant massage in connection with things like improved sleep and reduced crying. I'll say this is an area where the research quality varies a lot study to study, and I don't want to overstate it, but the broad direction that touch matters mechanically, not just emotionally, for a developing nervous system. That part does line up with a lot of what these cultural practices seem to have figured out, generations before anyone could measure cortisol levels in a lab. What I love about this, and I think this is going to be the thread running through this whole series, is that none of these cultures needed the cortisol study to know that holding a baby a certain way, a certain amount, mattered. They just knew through generations of paying attention, of passing down this is what works, parent to parent, grandmother to mother to daughter. That's its own kind of evidence, honestly. Maybe not the kind that gets published in a journal, but evidence all the same. One more, because I genuinely can't help myself, baby wearing, carrying a baby or toddler against the body in some kind of wrap or sling for large parts of the day. This isn't new, and it isn't niche. It shows up across West Africa with traditional cloth wrapping methods, across Latin America with the rebozo, in parts of Asia with various carrier styles, and honestly, in a lot of places, it was never really a choice the way it can feel like a trendy parenting choice here. It was just how you got things done while also keeping a baby fed, calm, and close. And the research angle here connects right back to that co-regulation idea I talk about constantly. A baby or toddler held against a moving, breathing body, hearing a heartbeat, feeling motion, picking up on the caregiver's own state through proximity. That's about as close to constant, gentle regulation as it gets mechanically. Some studies on baby wearing have looked at things like reduced crying time and even effects on attachment security, though again, study quality varies a lot here, and I don't want to overstate any single finding, but the pattern, closeness equals regulation equals a calmer baby, shows up again and again across cultures that never needed a study to tell them that. What gets me about this one specifically is how it flips a script I grew up with. The idea that independence means a baby who's content being put down in a separate space for long stretches, versus the idea in a lot of these traditions that a baby being almost constantly held is the normal, expected, unremarkable state, and nobody's worried about whether that baby will ever learn to be independent. Two completely different starting assumptions about what a baby even needs, and both produce, by all accounts, kids who grow up just fine. So that's the plan for this series. We're going to go practice by practice, culture by culture, teas, rituals, hygiene habits, sleep practices, all sorts of things, and look at the story behind each one, where it comes from, what people believed it did, and then where the research exists, what we now know about whether and how it actually works. Always with the caveat that this is curiosity and context, not a replacement for actual medical care. If there's a remedy or tradition from your family, something your grandmother did, something specific to where you or your family is from, I would genuinely love to hear about it. Drop it in the comments. I read all of them, and honestly, some of the best things I've found for this series have come from comments on other videos where someone mentions something almost as an aside, and I end up going down a research rabbit hole for 2 days. And before I let you go, one more thing, because I'd feel a little dishonest not mentioning it. This kind of curiosity, this why does this small thing actually work question, It's the exact same instinct behind everything else I do here, including the reset cycle. Regulate, break, repair started the same way. Me noticing something that seemed to just work and then refusing to leave it alone until I understood why. If you haven't checked it out yet, it's pinned in the comments. And if this kind of thing is interesting to you, the science and the global, generations deep wisdom side of all this, hit subscribe and come be part of the Tiny Feelings fam. This series is going to be a regular thing alongside everything else I do here, and I'm honestly more excited about it than I expected to be.